Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the BeDifferential Podcast. I'm your host, Ava Gregory, and this week we are joined by Jonathan Grace, motorsport broadcaster and journalist. Welcome to this week's episode.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm stoked to be here.
I'm really excited to hear your story and learn a little bit more about what you do and the different disciplines you're involved in. Before we really get into it, why don't you tell the listeners just a little about who you are and why they should be interested?
So like you said, I'm a motorsport broadcaster and journalist. I kind of really got into the racing world, on kind of the written journalistic route. So I write, and podcast host for Sports Car 365. So I do on-site coverage, a little bit of off-site coverage, writing, a photo here or there when we need it, but mostly writing. I'm kind of one of our IMSA journalists, and then I do all of our SRO America coverage as well, and then kind of help out here or there. So I went and did Le Mans with them this year, which was so much fun. I'd never covered Le Mans as a journalist, so I was unbelievably excited to do that. And then I host our podcast, Double Stint, every week, which has been a ton of fun. I'm a huge audio nut. I've always been a big audio nerd, so I love that side of things. And then I work for IndyCar Radio as one of their pit lane reporters, doing a couple races per year, and then with IMSA directly doing some video work too.
I love how diverse your different roles are, and the fact that you do get to be involved in multiple different disciplines. Right off the bat, I'm going to ask the impossible question. Is there a favorite discipline that you have?
Oh gosh, that really is impossible because I always think whatever track for whatever series I'm at, I'm like, this is my favorite. This is the best track in the world, and this is my favorite. And then I go to another one, I'm like, oh shoot, no, this is it. I think there's something to love about everything, but American racing in general, I'm just such a big fan of. Anyone that watches IMSA or IndyCar, or SRO, I don't have to sell you on the product. If you've been to a race, it's great. It's like one of my favorite things to watch someone go to a race for the first time, because then they get home and don't shut up about it, because it's the coolest thing ever. And it absolutely is. I think it's easy to take it for granted when we get, the privilege of going for work. But, I don't know. Sports car racing kind of has my heart a little bit, but it's also IndyCar is like kind of what got me into racing a lot in general way back in the day when I was, starting out as kind of a racing fan. So I think it's whatever track I'm at, that's my favorite. But, if there's cars going by and I'm there, I'm happy.
That is a fair enough answer, and I know it's impossible. So you just alluded to, but let's talk a little bit. What's the origin story? How did Jonathan first get involved in motorsports to begin with?
Well, it's kind of funny. We have a running joke in my family that the car gene skipped a generation. My grandfather on my dad's side, huge car guy. I think when he met my grandmother, their first date, he took her to a flat track motorcycle race, which is an insane thing to do. I don't know why she stayed with him, but good on her. But he was just that kind of guy. When he bought his first car in high school, he took it to the Irwindale drag strip here in California, and did that before he even brought it home. So,
also,
and my dad has
I
know. I did.
Right?
I know.
Yeah.
It's so sad. I know they're dropping like flies, but we've still got Willow Springs out here. So
good.
crossing my fingers. But yeah, so I think I was kind of always around cars with him and got to talk shop with him, but it wasn't really until, like middle school, high school. My mom actually got an email from the Peterson Car Museum out here, which if you haven't been, next time you're in LA, the Peterson is the best. I love it so much.
I definitely agree. Listeners, you should go.
It's the coolest place. It's like car mecca in LA. It's awesome. Anyway, she got an email about a Red Bull GRC event at the Port of LA. And she was like, well, Jonathan likes cars and this seems neat and tickets are cheap. Like, let's go. So, a Red Bull GRC event was technically the first race I ever went to. And I was like, okay, this is going to be my personality forever. It was so much fun. The paddock was open. There were like 27 fans. It was fantastic. We got to, hang out with Ken Block and Tanner Faust and Scott Speed all day. It was so much fun. And they were so nice. And then from there, I think one of my friend's dad was watching the Monaco Grand Prix at some point. And I was like, oh, what's this? So I kind of got into F1, and then I was like, wait, we have IndyCar here, and I could just go to a race. And so my first IndyCar race I actually went to Laguna Seca with my grandpa. And that was really fun because in all his years of being a car fan, he had never been to an IndyCar race.
That's
And
the
so
race
that was
I
really
still haven't
cool.
been to either. And I actually was
Really?
supposed to go to Laguna this upcoming weekend at the time of recording this for my first IndyCar race. And now I'm going to a different race somewhere else so I'm missing it. But yeah, I know that's still one that I haven't gotten to experience yet.
Have you, well, I know you've been to Monterey because I met you, I think, in
Yeah,
Monterey.
many, many times.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, IndyCar at Laguna is awesome. It's just,
Yeah.
you don't think things should be able to go down the corkscrew that quickly.
Oh my
It's
God, I'm
awesome.
sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so tell us. So you went with your grandpa and you got to experience IndyCar at Monterey. So you're just continuing this trajectory of, well, I'm destined
Mhm.
for motorsport, essentially.
No, exactly. And I was like, okay, well now I want to just try to be at the track as much as possible. So I think 2 weeks later, because this would have been 2021, was the kind of that weird post-COVID year where Laguna and Long Beach were after, kind of in the fall. And so I
Hmm.
went to the Long Beach Grand Prix like the next week or 2 weeks later. And that was my first IMSA race,
Oh, wow.
which was a blast. And I was like, okay, well, I got to see IndyCar again. And, I've been following it a little bit, but I had never like gotten to see sports car racing up close. And it just like blew my mind. To see the Long Beach Grand Prix in person is awesome. And I felt like such a fake fan because in all my years of growing up in LA, I had never been down to Long Beach for the race, so it was great. And from there, I there was an attorney who had been he still does a ton of work in motorsports, immigration work, who was trying to kind of introduce me to people to get my foot in the door, and he introduced me to Ryan Marine. Who, if you're watching, thank you, Ryan. I would not be working in racing if it wasn't for you. He's just been the best. I get to work with him a couple times a year on the IndyCar Radio side, and get to see him at the track for pretty much everything I go to because he works. I'm convinced in every type of racing. Um, and then from there, he got me an audition with IndyCar and kind of recommended me for the Sports Car 365, and then it kind of went from there.
So has your role with each of these different companies evolved, or are you kind of in the same style role that you were in? Like when you began with Sports Car 365, was it writing and some photography? With IndyCar, has it always been on the radio? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think with 365, it started out really just with the podcast. Ryan, just because he's incredibly talented, was kind of to the point where he had to make some choices of, I need to put focus on this series, this series, and this series, and so he was heading out from 365 after a couple of years there, and they needed a new host, and so I got to take over there, which was super fun. I did a lot of podcast work in college just with university sports, and so it's something I found out that I really liked. And then from there, John DeGeese, the editor-in-chief, kind of tried me out for some writing. So Watkins Glen was my first race, which was a ton of fun. Love that track.
That's so funny.
And
Really quick, actually, Watkins Glen was my first IMSA race outside of Road Atlanta. Yeah, I
was
haven't
it
been
really?
back since 2019, but yeah, that was literally my first IMSA race. So yeah, that's insane. Just
Oh,
it's
you've
a
got to get
starting place
back.
for so many of us. I know.
It really, how it's crazy how many people I've talked to that Watkins was their first IMSA race, which
Yeah,
for first IMSA race, it's kind of a great one. It's
yeah,
6 hours. You get the endurance part. It's in a stunning part of the country. It's a
yeah.
great track. It's old school. I don't have to sell you on it, but it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Okay, so you were there. That was your first race with them.
And then from then, John has kind of had me do a little bit more writing, a little bit more writing, a little bit more writing. And so this year is pretty much, I think, is at about capacity
Mm.
for that. And then with IndyCar, I think 22, 23, 23, Long Beach, I got to audition with them. I just did an FP1 session. And then finally last year, I think Georgia Hannaberry, because she's incredibly good at what she does, had a lot of people asking for her to be on air, and so she had to fulfill, I think, a TV commitment, and so I filled in for her at St. Pete last minute, and that kind of started me doing some of the races with them. And so I kind of do most of our West Coast races. So I'm going up in a couple days to Monterey for Laguna, which I'm really excited for. I really really love that race. Yeah, so and that's kind of steadily starting to grow a little bit as well. And then I think just through being at the track with IMSA, we kind of started to have the conversation about maybe doing some video stuff. IMSA has been pushing really hard on the social media and video front, and they're doing a lot of really creative things with Coforce and with Marshall Pruitt, and John Doonan has been super willing to try new things, and really invest in that side of it, and it's been really fun to work with the team there.
That's awesome. So not only have you worked in multiple different motorsport disciplines, but you've also gotten a chance to storytell and share in different platforms and ways. Which kind of outlet is the most fulfilling for you? Is it that radio aspect? Is it writing? Is it your photography? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the writing side has been really fun because that's not something I really necessarily planned on doing in racing, and it's something I've really liked. John DeGeese, to his credit, when I started out, I was very used to writing for broadcast and not for print. And so he was very patient with me when I started and really spent a lot of time helping me get up to speed on that side of things. And I'm really, really grateful for that because I really do like sitting down and kind of pulling a story out. But the broadcast side of things is for sure my favorite. It's the route I want to go and be doing full time eventually down the road, whether that's on the radio or on TV. That's kind of the side of things I want to put more focus on. So it's been really fun and really fulfilling to get to do that this year. SRO gave me the chance to kind of be on TV on their stream for the first time this year in Sebring, and I had way too much fun. So that was, again, thank you, Ryan, and to everyone there who gave me that opportunity to do that. But yeah, I think for me, that's really fulfilling. If you can't tell, I'm a yapper. So getting to talk and help try to tell stories in that front is a lot of fun.
No, that's really cool. So I'm going to ask because, this podcast really is to showcase the access and entry points. And you're talking a lot about some of your first opportunities and first chances you got, but you also mentioned schooling. Do you have a degree in broadcasting? Talk us through maybe if you think that that's helped or what skill sets you might have taken. Not that it's absolutely necessary, but for those might be interested in joining as well.
No, that's a great question because that was a huge part of it, to be honest. I went to Loyola Marymount and I got my bachelor's degree in journalism. And I thought at the time, I was like, okay, once I decided I want to do journalism, I want to do sports broadcasting, I want to be on air, doing athletics. This was even before I had realized it was possible to do the racing thing. My whole plan was to kind of, go and try to work for, do the typical kind of work for an affiliate station somewhere in the middle of nowhere, earn my stripes, and then, do a master's program, go from there. I just got very, very lucky with people who were very nice and believed in what I wanted to do and helped introduce me to the right people and kind of helped me get a foot in the door. But I think honestly, what made the biggest difference is for my work study job, I got to work with the broadcast department and call games. And that was huge because by the time I graduated, I had 4 years worth of stuff I could put on a reel. And I had done some podcast work, and then I had, been on air. And during that time, the school had done a deal with ESPN Plus, and so just having a reel with that logo in the corner was huge. So that made a huge difference. But I think it came down to, I went to a mid-major university. We had, I think, including grad students, it's like 9,000, 9,500. So not huge. So there was access to be able to do that, which I think helped too. But getting to do that in college and just producing content before I graduated, I think made a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Throughout this conversation too, you've brought the trend up of a few people that helped, like Ryan, who really supported some of those introductory and preliminary levels of your career. Talk to me a little bit about the importance or the value that you see in networking. I mean, I think in our industry, as the broader motorsport space, it's all about networking, but tell me a little bit about some of your experiences there and if there's been others throughout your career that have helped you as well.
Oh, totally. It's, I think with most industries, especially entertainment or sports, networking and who you have in your circle is huge. So yeah, again, Dustin Hesseltine, who kind of introduced me to people in the first place, Ryan, who helped me on the broadcast front, John DeGeese at 365, who's been huge, who's introduced me to everyone in the paddock just through getting to work there. And on the video side, getting to work with Marshall Pruitt and learn from him, and John Doonan, who I give him so much credit for how hands-on he is with all of the media side of things. I mean, he's pitching story ideas and working with us creatively on that. I dare you to find another series where the president of the series is that invested in the media side of things, and I think that's so cool. So yeah, he's been huge. And the folks at SRO too, Greg Gill and Taylor, who've taken kind of a chance on me there. I think it's really important. I think racing is one of those things where it's, especially in the US, it's growing, but it's still kind of this little thing, and it still feels a little bit like a close-knit family, and everyone seems to be, for the most part, really willing to help, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
I think the IMSA paddock and the SRO paddock in particular feel so inviting and so warming. Even in IndyCar race, I mean, the access you get as a fan on top of everything is great. But once you're in it, people seem really excited to have you there, and I really like that.
You mentioned just a second ago in that the creative aspect and the creative perspective. Your role is quite creative, right? So, I mean, all across the different things that you contribute to motorsports in this world, tell me, how do you find your creative voice? Whether that's through any of the outlets that you're involved with, how do you balance information, education, and your creativity?
Well, that's an awesome question. It's a tough one. I think, honestly, and this is kind of a silly answer, but at the end of the day, it's almost the selfish thing of, I just want everyone else to love racing as much as I love it. So if it's on air, it's, I'm gonna yap at you until you love it as much as I love it, or I'm gonna write until you do, or try to take a picture that shows how cool this is, or reflect that in a podcast or a story or what have you. But I think probably enthusiasm is the biggest part of it. I love this stuff so much, and I tell people all the time, it feels like a fake job because we get to go play race cars on the weekend.
Honestly,
Um,
I feel that. There's no way my job's real. It's ridiculous.
right, but it's really fun, and it's cool when you start to see it mean things to people, because it means a lot to me. And I get a lot of joy out of that. But I think, I hope my enthusiasm comes through, but I think that's a big driving force for me, is I try to do things every weekend just to remind myself that I'm a fan at the end of the day. And I think for me, that's been really important, and kind of a good motivator for the work I do.
You're just naturally segueing into the things I want to ask. This is perfect. So, you're sharing stories, you're getting more people to love what you love. And I always, like, anyone that knows me, especially friends that are outside of working in motorsports, I always say, I just want to share the sport. How do you see the next generation coming in? How do you see the curiosity translating into a true new fan? And then second follow-up part of that, how do you see the perspective of motorsport and the growth of motorsport changing from a career aspect as well?
Yeah, two really good ones. I think this has been a cool year because, the year racing wise kind of starts in Daytona.
Right.
And Daytona was more packed than I've ever seen it. It was so cool. I've never been so excited, having so much trouble getting through a grid walk. And just, we watched the start of I'm talking about the Rolex 24. If anyone, I know NASCAR's right after, but the Rolex 24. We kind of got to go up in the, I guess, the pagoda, the booth that looks over the start finish line. And it was so neat to see that many people so excited about racing, whether they had been to the race for 30 years and were camping there, or they had just, popped in because they thought it was neat. It doesn't matter. They were there and it was cool. But I think the TV numbers are reflecting that, social media views, YouTube streams, things like that. It's growing genuinely, and it's really exciting. IndyCar is doing the same thing. You look at how much growth they've had with Fox Sports coming on board, and on the social media side, and the drivers kind of becoming these celebrities. I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement, and people are discovering that this is a really cool, accessible type of racing, whether it's IndyCar or SRO or IMSA. And I think that's really neat. I think on how it's going to change things, I think, social media is going to continue to be more and more relevant. It already is. It's a massive integral part of what we do. I think it's probably the main driving force behind why the sport in all aspects is growing, is on, people looking at it on their phones, on their laptops, rather than watching it on network TV or things like that. And so I think that the personalities behind that, content creators, are going to continue to be more and more relevant. You look in any media center, and there's more people producing visual media than anyone else. There's more photographers, videographers, presenters, influencers than there are print journalists. And I think there's a lot of people that may see that as a bad thing. For one, am still a huge believer in the value of print journalism. I think it's important and kind of upholding those standards. But at the end of the day, we want the sport to grow. And if it's growing in an authentic way that celebrates what's good about the sport, then I think that's a great thing. So I think that's probably the way it's going to continue to change the most. And just in the few years that I've been lucky enough to be a part of it, I've seen it change.
I think that's really important what you just emphasized, because from like Drive to Survive that came out, there was a huge divide of if it was positive or negative. It was fake
Yeah.
fans, it was whatever. And at the end of the day, it really is just increasing visibility to expand our sport, right? And I
Yeah.
think what you just brought up is a very valid point that is a really hot topic just in what I see across my social platforms as well as in the business, is how are we looking at influencers and ambassadors? And I
Hmm.
think there are concerns because is it degrading credibility? Is it how are you vetting what people are saying and sharing out to ensure that it has integrity, quite frankly? So I'm curious, what do you see the role of those creative voices and how they shape the view of fans for the sport?
That's a really good one. And honestly, I don't know that I'm in a position to answer it necessarily, but I think personally, I think on the whole, generally, it's a good thing. Of course, there's going to be incidents here or there, people here or there who abuse it, but that happens on the journalistic side too. That happens
Yeah.
on the broadcast side. That happens on in every platform. I think right now there's just a higher concentration of social media personalities, influencers, and content creators. And so if we see those things pop up and people testing the waters, we might see a higher degree of it there. But I definitely don't think it's a bad thing. I think at the
Yeah.
end of the day, on the whole, these folks are celebrating their sport. They're using their talents to help grow something that we all care about. And isn't that the goal at the end of the day? To just showcase how cool this is. Yes, of course, there's going to be people that go in and they just want to, post pictures of themselves and that's
Yeah.
fine. But I think that the people that are using those skills and actually working directly with the series and with the sport are really positively contributing. It's a hard one, and I don't envy the position of the people in the credentialing offices that have to make those decisions, because it's a
Yeah.
really, really tough one.
Yeah.
But I look at like a lot of tracks like Laguna Seca, for instance, who have a dedicated credential for content creators, and they've been kind of one of the tracks to pilot that program, and I think that's
Mm.
really neat.
I actually
I
didn't
think
know that.
with
That's
that,
really cool.
yeah, it's really neat. I think they just started it last year, but it's cool. It's given a lot of content creators, especially smaller content creators, a chance to actually get to work with the sport. But IndyCar's done that too. They've reached out to smaller content creators who are just trying to start, and it's a win-win. Someone who
Yeah.
maybe doesn't have as big of a following gets access to the drivers, and the series gets to help promote someone who's excited about the sport. It's kind of like a little talent feeding process. It's a support series, if you will,
It's
to use a
honestly,
racing analogy.
what you just said is actually a great point too, because for the listeners, so when I met you at Monterey or in Laguna, I was there for IMSA, but the track actually brought me out for that, and it wasn't my work, and so it was, for the first time, I typically have access because I have an annual IMSA hard card, whatever it is. But to your point, had I not had that, and they reached out to me through this podcast, like that is, I'm a very small account, I'm a very small platform, and so you're so right that it creates that opportunity that wouldn't have existed. And I also just want to make a quick mention, not necessarily to you, but just like for the people that argue, oh, there's so many influencers. I think that it's just a little different now than it was a decade ago because everything is so visual, to your point. And I think a decade ago, or maybe two now, 15, whatever, where it was bloggers that were getting the
Yeah.
access. It was this written word, but it didn't have all the same visual aspects of like videos, reels, the high intake of content that we have now. It was static photos and blogging. And that's how they essentially got the same benefits that influencers and content creators do now. So I think it's a really
Great point.
important thing to emphasize because it's like, it's been here. It's just that the
Hmm.
visualization affirms it more now. And to your point, it's more saturated. So we just have this constant consumption as opposed to seeking it out. So anyway, I love that you brought that up and that you brought up the track bringing in an opportunity to say, you know what, this is going to impact our sport, and it impacted ticket sales. I mean, Laguna IMSA looked great this year.
Yeah,
In my opinion, like one of the busiest years they'd had. So yeah, I
I
think that's
agree.
awesome. A great visualization as well of the impact on what we can do if we support what people are trying to share for visibility of our sport.
I agree. I think it's really important. I think with that though, I think there is maybe a little bit more of a need right now for media literacy.
Mhm.
And I think there's a need for it in the paddock, and there's a need for it especially on the fan side. Just being able to
Yeah.
discern, very basic stuff. And I'm not trying to come at this from some ivory tower. I'm a journalist. No, it's
Give us
but
the ivory tower, Jonathan. It's fine.
no, I think I think it's important to be able to look at a piece of media and decide, is this editorial? Is this
Right.
journalistic? And really, that's it. Is this someone's opinion, or is this, someone on behalf of an organization or an outlet or a series expressing and reflecting their views? And
Yeah.
just kind of being able to determine that. And that's really it. But I think the same applies to if you're watching basketball, football, soccer, any type of sport, and really anything. I think everyone could use a little bit of media literacy here and there. I find myself having to go back to those things. I was lucky that I got taught it, and it was ingrained in us in school, for my degree. But it's something that I found really, really useful. And again, it's not at all something to be gatekeeping of this has more value than this. It's just determining what avenue that goes and where it falls. That's all.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. That's a really great point. And I'll kind of use that as my segue to the next question. So you've learned media literacy, you've had the opportunity to have some experiences. What are some things in your career that you've maybe had to learn the hard way? Some things that you had to take away and better yourself overall, but that were definitely a challenge to get there?
Gosh, that's a good one. It's hard. I was
We
trying
don't
to
like
think about a
thinking about our
way.
failures.
Yeah. Well, I think, for me, like I said, John DeGeese was so patient with me, and still is, just on the writing side, because most of the writing I do is for broadcast. It's looser, it's more conversational, things like that. And of course, going through school, you learn AP style and things like that. And so I think I actually brought my AP style book to Watkins Glen the first year. I looked like such a dork. But it was, he's been great with helping me there throughout the years. But trial and error on that front, I think, has been one. But it's been fun to learn too. Every publication in the paddock has its own unique voice, and so it's been fun to kind of learn 365's voice. But if you read an article on Racer, on Daily Sports Car, motorsport.com, Front Stretch, whatever, they're all going to have their own different flavors, and that's pretty cool too. In the same way that if someone's making visual content, they all have their different voices. I think on the journalistic side, and the same on the reporting side, on air, I've had a couple instances where drivers maybe haven't been, you know, no one likes to have a microphone shoved in their face when they've lost, or they've been bumped from qualifying, or they've lost the championship. I imagine, as a driver or team owner, that is probably up there with some of your least favorite things to have happen on a weekend, is someone in a brightly colored polo shirt coming up and being, "Hey, tell me about how you lost."
Right.
So I think my first couple years in the paddock, being the one that typically interviewed P2 through P5, I had to learn how to dance the line there, which actually I'm really grateful for, because I think it's made me a better interviewer, because you have to approach things with empathy. On air live, it's a different story, because anything could happen.
Yeah.
And certain drivers are more inflammatory than others, but at the end of the day too, they're human, they're people, they have emotions, they work in a very stressful job, and they've just gotten out of a life and death situation where things didn't go their way. Of course they might be a little volatile sometimes. I would be too if I was in their shoes. But I think, and also dealing with things that come up, especially in terms of breaches of the rules. That's been a really tricky one to learn how to cover, because I think there's a line that has to get drawn between presenting information and doing your due diligence as a journalist, or as a presenter, and then on the back end of that, fanning the flames. Because at a certain point, people know about it, they've seen it, they've heard about it. We don't really need to kind of poke at it anymore. I think we also need to allow people the opportunity to move on. It happens all the time, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Cars are going to be underweight. Tires are going to be under pressure. Wing angles are going to be off. It happens, and we can report on it and we can move on. So that's been a really valuable lesson too, of just kind of how to handle those things better, as the years go on.
I think that's actually, I really love that you brought that topic up of it happens, it move on. Compartmentalizing and learning how to navigate that is so important, especially in such a high energy, high emotion industry. So I think that that is just a great takeaway. So now I kind of want to ask, continuing like down the work side, how do you manage? You are involved in multiple different disciplines with multiple different companies. You get to kind of have autonomy over what your work looks like to some extent. How do you manage balancing your work, finding clients, getting stories out, and kind of staying on top of it? I feel like being involved in so much can be a heavy plate. So how do you manage that?
I think it's something I'm still learning and would
Me
love to
too.
be better at, if I'm being perfectly honest. I know you and I were kind of talking about it at the beginning, but I am so bad with self promotion. I need to be better at it. I've had a lot of good friends who work on the media side who've been very sweet and trying to help me with that. So I'm trying to learn it, especially on the social media side. It's a painful process, but it's something that it's necessary. That's one part where I'm a little jealous of people who do content creation and are able to do that with such ease, because I really struggle with it.
Yeah.
But it's a really important and necessary part of the game. You're effectively your own agent until you're the broadcaster, and there are certain, talent in the paddock who have representation, who have agents and stuff like that. And I think that's a huge part. I think at my stage of my career, as valuable as that would be, economically is probably not a great choice.
Yeah.
So one day that would be great, and I would love to just hand it off to somebody. But right now, I'm trying to look at it as a really valuable learning experience of just how to kind of be your own client or manager, so to say. But it's been good. It's tough though.
Do
It
you feel
doesn't
like
come
your
naturally.
skills that you're using and applying in your job will translate to that at all? And you just haven't given it the time, or do you feel like it's a totally different challenge to tackle?
I'd never thought of it that way. Because I'm someone, I'm a talker, but I kind of describe myself as an introvert. I can just flip the extrovert switch if I'm on air. Like, you give me a headset and a microphone, I'm the biggest extrovert you've ever seen. But I will need to go back to the hotel and not talk to anybody for a
Yeah.
few hours.
Yeah, recently. Yeah.
So, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe I do need to try to apply that mindset a little bit to the promotion thing. Maybe that would make it. I hadn't thought of it that way, but I'm gonna maybe try
Here I
that.
am. Just let me end the podcast here, drop the mic and dip. Well, okay, so let's pivot a little bit more in the conversation because I'm curious, and I think listeners would be too. As someone that's involved in journalism and broadcasting, you do have access to a lot of the behind the scenes. Talk us through what a typical, and this I'm sure varies a little bit for which race you're at, but what does a typical race weekend look like for you from setup, execution, post production, et cetera?
Yeah. Um, Race weekends, we're in a privileged position where race weekends, regardless of the championship, kind of look the same. There's a
Hmm.
media day, practice, qualifying, in the race. The timelines of that look a little bit different with support series and stuff like that. But really, it's, I'll take the last race weekend I did at VIR for SRO. You fly out on a Wednesday or a Thursday. It's a lot of red eyes. Um, and you get there and you want to maximize media day. It's usually that Thursday, typically. Sometimes for endurance racing, it's a little different, but that's a really important day. You get there, you have access to the drivers. Sometimes there are dedicated media sessions. IMSA's done a cool thing recently in the last couple of rounds where they've started a bullpen. IndyCar's done a bullpen too. Big fan of a bullpen. All the drivers are in the same. It's kind of, we call it fish in a barrel, because everyone's there, and they're kind of trapped. Sorry, guys. Um, but you get a couple minutes to bother them and answer, ask them some questions. A lot of teams are really good about doing meet the teams as well, especially on the sports car side. All the Cadillac drivers will be here, all the Porsche, whatever. So anyway, early in the week, bank your stories, get some interviews, and then it's really just sit back and watch it evolve. If you're writing, you have your session reports, or for the radio, you're on air. So it's, getting there in time to do a fax, get your belt measured up, your gear on, work through any technical, problems that we might have. We really tend to not have too many. The BSI guys and girls are really, really good at what they do. Um, and on the writing side, just making sure you have information. A big fan of multiple screens. If you're sitting in the media center, there's always timing and scoring up. There's always, commentary. You're watching the feed, which is always funny to me. You're at a racetrack, but you're in a building watching the same feed that everyone at home is
It's
watching. I
kind of
always find
better
that funny.
though. Sometimes it's better.
It is, because you have more information, but just having
Mhm.
as much as you can at your disposal so you can make decisions on the fly. But I think going into a race weekend prepped is just as important as getting there and doing the interviews. Because if you get there and
Well,
don't know what to ask, it's almost a worse situation.
no, that's totally fair. And we can get back to what the close of the weekend looks like. But you've made a couple comments, and I'm curious, what gear is always in your bag? I mean, you are, you enjoy photography, but sometimes you don't
Mhm.
always need that for your job. So talk us through audio, video, visual. Like, tell us what you bring with you.
Yeah. So if I'm at a race, depending on when I fly home, we always record the podcast for Sports Car 365 either Sunday night or on Monday for a Tuesday release. So I have a
Okay.
little remote podcast pack. I have my lovely Zoom H6 that goes with me everywhere. Couple XLR cables and couple mics. And we're doing the audio off a little Zoom H1. But that goes with me if I need to record car audio, things like that. Phone is a big one. All of my driver interviews are just on a voice memo,
Wow,
and that
that's
just
sick.
gets transcribed. Yeah, it's I mean, if they're if they're going to get played on the radio, actually, we've done some of those on a voice memo, to be honest. Rick, who's our engineer, is a magician. He can make anything sound good, I'm convinced. But if it's going out for something other than the radio, I try to record it in higher quality. Um, Photography, yeah, I get to shoot a little bit and have some photos worked up and published for 365, which is really fun. So I've got my R6 Mark II, love it to death, and I just travel with a 24 to 105 because it's a good all rounder. Most of the times I'm shooting in and around the paddock. If I was shooting more trackside, I would need something longer.
Yeah.
But most times I'm not because I'm not in a photo vest. It's usually we need ambient shots. We need shots of this car. We need that car is split in half during practice. We need a picture of that. Things like that.
Hmm.
I always have a notebook. I'm a big fan of the Field Notes reporter's notebooks. I love that company, and I love a reporter's notebook. I do take notes on an iPad sometimes. It's a little iPad mini with an Apple Pencil in a humongous OtterBox case because I am really good at dropping things, and dropping things on pit lane is not a great idea.
It's not a good idea.
No. So that's the notebook or iPad's always in my pocket. And if I'm doing something broadcast wise, I've got my clipboard with my printed notes, and my driver scanner. I love my driver scanner. It's so fun to just get to eavesdrop. I mean, for the radio, it's kind of necessary because you get to
Yeah.
keep tabs on strategy and things like that. But for an IMSA race, when there's so many drivers in the field, it can be really valuable. It's hard sometimes to sort through information, but the technical team at Racing Radios and Racing Electronics both are awesome, depending on which one you use, and they'll give you a hand. Even as a fan, they're really good. So that always goes with me. Set of headphones. I'm trying to think what else is like really crucial.
This is quite
Credential,
the kit to
obviously.
always bring with
Yeah.
you. I love.
I've got a big bag that just goes. It's a photography bag, but I've kind of got it modular where
Sectioned out.
everything's got
Yeah.
its little place. But those are kind of the big ones that always go with me. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, well, thank you for taking that tangent to tell us about your
Yeah.
gear. So now let's rewind. You said,
Okay.
it's really helpful when you're at a race weekend and you come prepared. You know what to ask. So talk us through now. You've gotten to the track. You've maybe had some of your initial kind of interviews and conversations with the drivers. Tell us what the rest of the weekend looks like.
Yeah, so going again through a typical Thursday through Sunday, let's say, again, and sometimes endurance races look different. You get into your practice sessions Friday and Saturday, and this is, I think, where the stories start to develop.
Yeah.
You can have storylines that linger from last race weekend or coming into that event, but once you're at the track and things start to happen, someone's crashed, someone's faster, someone's way slower than you thought, someone's having issues. That's where it gets juicy. That's where it gets good.
Yeah.
Stuff off track. We've seen a couple bits of almost extracurricular activity, shall we say, with drivers having words of displeasure with each other in the IndyCar paddock.
Yeah.
That's obviously a slam dunk for a story. We could go on a separate tangent about that, but anyway, yeah. So that's when you're working up stories, you're chasing things, and then if extra stories need to be written at that point, if you're doing print or reported on, that's what we do. For IndyCar Radio, we do bank a lot of our interviews in the media bullpen, and they get played later on during practice sessions. Sometimes you'll see team personalities walking around, track owners, things like that. That's a great time to do that too, because once the weekends get rolling, they're busy. If you're going into an IndyCar race, it's not just IndyCar on track. There's support series. Same with IMSA, same with SR. I mean, VIR, there were 6 series on track. There was always something happening, which is fun, but there's not a ton of extra time to go and do stuff to bank interviews, things like that. And then once the races start, you have race day morning. Race day morning is maybe my favorite part of any weekend, because it's kind of the calm before the storm. Everyone's qualified, what everyone's got. There's some unpredictable aspects of going into the race, of course, especially if it's longer distance, but you get to do the grid walk. And this is like one of my favorite things. It's my little reminder. I try to do a grid walk at least for just 5 or 10 minutes, just get on the grid, see the cars, talk to the drivers, even just be there. It's a little reminder to be a fan. And I think it's something that little Jonathan would have freaked out if he knew that you got to be, standing on the grid and looking at race cars.
Yeah.
And I love that, because then you go, and then it's a lot of hours of really hard work. Whether you're on air, you're standing in pit lane, either in a fire suit or, mercifully for IndyCar Radio, not in a fire suit, which is a kind of a godsend, because it gets hot at some of these North American tracks.
Yeah.
Or you're sitting in a chair for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. Some of the 24-hour races covering print wise are brutal. One of our European editor for 365, Davey, he did kind of the triple header of the 24-hour races, Le Mans, Spa, and Nürburgring, back to back to back. I don't know how he did it.
Wow.
It's a lot of coverage. That's where taking shifts, we do our driver changes, so to speak. But yeah, and then post race, it's kind of this mad dash of, as the checker flag falls, you see everyone in the media center scatter, and then we all gather stories. It's who can get to the driver first. It's this weird competitive camaraderie thing. Everyone wants to get to the guy that lost the championship, that lost on the last lap, that, car blew up with an hour to go, things like that. But you get a lot of really authentic, honest stories in those moments too, because it's a lot of raw emotion. Racing is a very emotional sport. And then you kind of sit back and debrief. Drivers come in and do the press conferences, and you ask questions. If there's stories that need to be worked up there, you try to find those angles. You look through the data, you look through the lap charts, through the stint time cards, you get real nerdy. And you look at, who was actually quick, who was not quick, how did they win? Sometimes stories emerge from that. And sometimes drivers will tell you things. And there's kind of your big storylines that you're looking at through the weekend, especially as we get into silly season, trying to poke and prod drivers for a little bit of info here or there.
Yeah.
What do you tell us? Can you hint us either way? And then working with stuff where maybe they'll tell you, but they'll be like, that's off the record. And so you may know this big secret the whole season, but you can't tell anybody. And it's just you just got to handle it the right way. But in my mind, it's part of the fun, and it's how you build trust with the drivers and the teams and the folks you work for. But hopefully that kind of sums it up. It's a very broad overview, and it's a little different for each, but generally that's how it goes.
No, that's great. I appreciate you taking the time to share that. You mentioned something during that overview, and I'm curious, when you do have so many different disciplines that you're involved in, I imagine there's a lot of back-to-back weekends, back-to-back races, et cetera. How do you manage and maintain finding still creative ways to storytell when you're essentially doing what's redundant weekend after weekend?
Yeah, it's this interesting thing that any broadcaster knows, any journalist knows. The analogy I always like to use is people who call basketball games. Calling basketball games in college was a great one for me, because you have to learn 47 different ways to say he scored. Or she scored, and so you try to get really good with using a thesaurus, or trying to write creatively and differently. So and so passed on lap 1. So and so took you try to, and you find your own voice through that, which is fun. But it's the same on the radio. It's the same written, trying to find different ways of saying the same thing. But I think that's where the creativity comes out, and that's where each writer, each journalist, each broadcaster's unique voice comes from, is how they go about telling those stories in the repetitive things. And then obviously the exciting stuff that happens in between, needs it kind of writes itself.
I think that's interesting because I guess there's kind of a second layer as well. You know, you have to find creative ways to say the same thing for the final product that people are reading, but how do you also find inspiration from the same types of things? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think it's you start to kind of go on autopilot with some of the stuff that's repetitive,
Mhm.
and then you get to focus on some of the nuances. So
Okay.
it's one of those things in sports car racing that's a double-edged sword because there is so much nuance, so much.
Mhm.
It's such a complicated type of racing,
Yeah.
which makes it fun in a way. For a new fan, is really tough because there's so much happening. But you can kind of focus on very unique niche things, if that makes sense. I know that's a
Mhm.
really broad answer, but
No, no, that's fair
say
actually. That's
yeah,
really fair.
but yeah, say a team is dominating, right, and they're winning every race. Then you start to look, all right, what are your storylines throughout there? What are the
Mhm.
little things? And it can change over a weekend too. You could have some some rookie that's been struggling, and all of a sudden he does great and wins practice, right? There's something
Mhm.
there, or a top guy crashes, or things like that. That stuff kind of writes itself, but it's tough. I think I look at photographers a lot, and I really I like to shoot. I think I'm decent at it. I am nowhere near the level of the folks that get paid to be invests, and I marvel at their work all the time. I feel so lucky that I have access to get to pull photos from some of them for articles, because it's such a joy. Because they look at the same things over and over and over, and they still find a different way to make it visually interesting. And I think that is so cool.
Yeah.
It is such a skill, and it's one of the cool things that helps present the sport. People do it on the broadcast, the camera operators, the directors. I think we get to be lucky to be a part of that on the radio or on TV to try to verbally present that. But this is such a visual sport. The cars look cool, they sound different, and making that visually appealing is really neat.
Absolutely. Okay, as we're beginning to close out here, I want to ask, because you have had experiences across different disciplines, you've gotten to see firsthand as a fan and as someone working in the industry, what is an event or a series that you have not documented yet that you would love to?
Mm. Oof, that's a good one. I've never been to Road America, and I'm
Whoa, wait,
really
what?
excited.
That's
I
crazy.
know. I'm so excited. I'm gonna get to do the IMSA weekend and the SRO weekend,
Yeah, that's
almost
coming
back to
up.
back. And I'm so yeah, it's just in a couple weeks. I'm really
Yeah,
excited for that one.
that's great.
Um, no pressure, but John Doonan, I think the last time we talked about it, he said, "Oh yeah, it's only my favorite place on earth." So
That's awesome.
I'm really excited.
Road America's a really great track, and the team up there, like at the track itself, is a really, really like close knit group that's really hardworking, and their efforts are so clear when you enter that track. So that's really exciting. I can't wait for you to experience it.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I would love to cover an IndyCar finale.
Okay.
Um, that'd be a huge one in any capacity. Spa. Gosh, I would love to see Spa. It's been
Okay.
like I've always
Wait,
described it
were
as
you
my
not just
favorite
at
track.
Spa?
I wasn't. No, we had so
Where?
Davey went and covered Spa for us for
Okay.
365, but I was at Le Mans, which that was a
Okay.
huge bucket list. I'd been once as a fan and loved it. I'm really grateful that I got to see it as a fan first, because working it is really hard.
No, that's fair.
Every yeah,
That's fair. I was
everyone in the
gonna
media
ask.
center will tell you that. Yeah.
No, that's interesting. I first of all have not done Le Mans, so that's very high on my list, just as a fan in general. But I really thought you were at Spa. I thought I saw it on socials, but I'm missing IndyCar because I'm going to F1 Spa, and I was literally going to ask you like your tips, but now I don't have a resource. Okay, so Spa is on your list. Wait, have you done any coverage for F1?
I have not. That would
Okay,
be pretty high on the list also.
okay, got it.
It's hard to be a racing fan and not have loved F1 at some point or still love F1. I know that's a whole other can of worms we could open, but it's I loved F1. I was so excited when Drive to Survive came around because I was like, oh my gosh, people are going to know about this sport that I've been talking about.
Yeah.
And then it kind of blew up, which was really cool to see. So I'd love to get to another F1 race. I haven't been to one in quite a while. I don't know that I've seen a race with the new generation of cars yet. So that would be cool. But yeah, covering an F1 race would be good. Covering Spa would be rad. I'm trying to think of anything else I think those are kind of the big ones. But yeah, working Le Mans this year, if I hope you get to go next year, it is a magical, magical place. It's one of those tracks like Daytona, like the 500 that just feels special.
Mhm.
And the pre-race is one of the coolest things you'll see in the sport.
That's so cool. Well, definitely, it's on my list, so we'll get there. It's not an if, but it's a win. So,
Yeah.
okay, last question to kind of round us out here. This is I don't know, it's an overloaded question, but what kind of legacy do you want to leave as a motorsports storyteller?
Oh, that's a great question. I just hope I make people excited about the sport. I hope that rubs off. I love it, and I will talk about it the whole day at nauseum. I just hope someone along the lines catches on to that. I also really think, especially in sports car racing, and in the open wheel ranks too, there's a lot of this. But there's drivers I think that get overlooked that are really talented, and maybe the funding's not there, or just timing wise, things don't work out. I would love to find a better way to help amplify their voices and their stories, and maybe in some small way contribute to them having some success in the sport, because I think there's a lot of really deserving drivers out there. You know, right now I think there's a lot of diversity initiatives to get more women into the sport, to get more underrepresented groups and minorities into the sport, and I think that's amazing. And I think we really need to continue to push on that hard. Because there's a certain demographic that tends to do well in the sport, and it's for a reason, and we need to change that.
Hmm.
Um, so I think I would love to be a part of helping to change that however I can. If I leave any legacy, I mean, it's a kind of whole, you want to leave the sport better than you found it. But yeah, if I can leave people excited and maybe help someone out along the way, that'd be great. And going back to your previous question, I can't believe this is absolutely on the top of my list. I want to work the 500. I want to work the 500 so bad. That is pole position. That's my final answer. But yeah,
I have not done this. I haven't been to the 500 either, and so I don't know, Jonathan. Next year we're gonna figure out. We're both gonna get to May
okay,
500. We'll high five on the grid.
absolutely. I'm
That's
looking
awesome.
forward to it.
That's fantastic. Well, and I also love the legacy idea you just shared. I feel like you just verbalized what really the mission behind this podcast is too, is just bringing visibility to those underrepresented groups and hopefully playing a role in them having success down the line. So, Jonathan, thank you so much for taking some time to share just some insights and snippets into your world. Where can the listeners follow along on your career and your journey?
Yeah, so if you're a fan of sports car racing, check out sportscar365.com. The Double Stint podcast comes out every Tuesday morning. If you like IndyCar, we'll be on the radio, or I'll be in pit lane for a couple of the races. And if it's not me, listen anyway. There's some of the best broadcasters in the business. I promise you'll have a good time. SRO has been very sweet about having me on some of their coverage. And I cover them on 365 as well. And then on IMSA's YouTube and social channels, I'm doing some work there with Marshall and with Coforce, and that's been a lot of fun too. So that's where you can find my work. And
Social
I'm on.
promotion, personal promotion.
Oh
Where are
gosh,
you,
no.
Jonathan?
Instagram is jmgrace.media. That's the big one where I'm the most active. Still working on the other ones, but
Perfect.
that's kind of the main one.
We will have all of that information that he just shared down below in the description so you can find it with ease. Jonathan, thank you again for joining. And listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much. This was such a pleasure.